Hello, today I have two short stories. These stories use lots of synonyms, lots of unusual words for things that you know. The stories are simple to understand, but I may use words or expressions that you've never heard before. So try to understand them from the context, okay? The first part is called The Guy with All the Vocabulary. Okay, here we go. I don't think David Perez was showing off when he used all his fancy English words, because to him they were just words. He had digested enough words in his life to write his own dictionary, and taking into account that he was Colombian, this meant that he could probably also put together a Spanish-English version without too much effort. I guess David had a love affair with words. This story started back in the days when David's brother-in-law, Stephen, so that's the brother of his wife, she came to live with them. The idea was for him to only stay a couple of weeks, but that soon turned into a few months, and then that became years. No one minded Stephen being there because he was a pretty quiet lad, with no vices and no bad habits. In fact, David thought that things ran more smoothly around the house when he was there, and his wife seemed to like having him around. To pass the time, when his sister was at work and David had nothing to do, the two young men played a lot of Scrabble, which is a board game based on crosswords. They played in Spanish at first, but then they changed over to English to make things more challenging for both of them. It was obvious that David had a better knowledge of English from the outset, but what Stephen lacked in vocabulary, he made up for with skill and craftiness and gamesmanship. The two of them battled away for hours on end, and neither player was prepared to concede that the other was the better player. There were days when they skipped lunch or dinner because they were so wrapped up in their game. Stephen's sister, Veronica, often came home from work and had to wait a good hour for them to finish their game before she could speak to them. Hardly a day went by without the two of them going head to head over the Scrabble board. But, like all good things, it had to come to an end. And it came to an end in a spectacular and abrupt fashion, creating huge friction and animosity within the family. Of course, no one is 100% sure of the facts, but there are always two sides to every story. But let's say that there are reports of liaisons in car parks very late at night and lingering kisses. I guess you're assuming that it was David who was misbehaving. Oh, but no, it was the sister that we're talking about. There was a massive outburst one night, with tables being upended and insults being hurled around. No one got much sleep that night. By morning, everyone was shattered from being woken up by intermittent eruptions of anger from one or the other of them. When Stephen eventually ventured out of his room, he found David sitting slumped over the kitchen table, drained of energy and looking pitiful and broken. Over the next hour or so, Stephen reluctantly helped his brother-in-law gather up his belongings and load them into his car. With a heavy heart, the two of them embraced before saying their farewells, and then David was gone. His marriage was finished, and that was the last time anyone saw him. David was found a few days later, drowned in his car at the bottom of a lake. His car had swerved off the road, careered down a steep slope, and sunk to the bottom of a lake. Poor Stephen was trapped inside. Upon hearing the news, Stephen went home and strangled his sister, and he was sentenced to 25 years in prison, where he became the world prison Scrabble champion. If you fall for any part of this concocted story, then you are as daft as the person who wrote it. There isn't an ounce of truth in it, and you would probably do better watching some fake videos on YouTube. Nevertheless, this serves as a reminder that you need to study more words and expressions if you want to show off your talents in English. Shut the fuck up! There you go, don't learn that. Right, I have another story. I wonder if I can edit that out. I don't normally swear in these videos. I've got itchy nose. Itchy. You know itchy and scratchy? Well, itchy is when it's molesta. And then scratch is what you do. So you scratch an itch. You scratch an itch. You see, you learn something. I'll ask for extra money for that. Okay. Next story. Talking of showing off. Well, we weren't talking of showing off. But there you go. Talking of showing off. Why is it that we encourage children to show off and be extroverted when we hate adults who act like that? In reality, we are much more comfortable with normal people who dress normally and who don't wear fancy clothes and use fancy expressions. We like normal because we feel less threatened. And I guess we always assume that the extrovert will be more popular and will get more friends. Most people think that I am an extrovert because of the way I teach, but in fact, I'm actually quite introverted and shy in the real world outside of the classroom. I know this may be hard to digest, but it is true. I don't talk to strangers, and I don't like strangers talking to me. I guess you have to take into account that I'm a gringo, and I get a lot of attention just walking down the street. It's hard to miss me. Back in the days when I was new in Colombia, I ventured out into other departments and travelled around pretty extensively. And, to be honest, at first I didn't mind the attention. People have always been nice to me, and it's not the people that annoy me. It's the lack of privacy. Each individual person isn't trying to bother me. It's the cumulative effect which gets to me, because I can't have a quiet cup of coffee without someone saying something to me or asking me for money. I should have said at the outset that I much prefer the friendliness of Colombian people over the cold disinterest of Spanish people. They're actually tired of having tourists in their country, and the honeymoon with tourism ended many years ago. For British people going to live in Spain, the challenge is getting into the Spanish community. Reluctantly, most people end up in English-speaking ghettos and communities with English bars and restaurants which cater to their particular English tastes. I was lucky because I found a room to rent, sharing with some Spanish guys, and I used my culinary skills to make up for my lack of vocabulary. In a nutshell, I cooked my way into their lives and made friends with their friends through dinner parties and lunches. It's a tactic I've used a little in Colombia, but it's not quite so effective because Colombians have a different relationship with food. Food is for eating when you are hungry, eaten on the edge of the bed or alone on the sofa. One of my crafty tricks to avoid attention in the street when I'm walking with someone is to speak gobbledygook, which is an invented language which sounds like German. This keeps the English-speaking people from attempting to impress me with their English. You see, I am a miserable old bastard, and I don't deserve your love and respect. I just want to be left alone, like you are. Ich finde, you can do nothing. Noch in snacken. Can snacken. Yeah, you go. Gobbledygook. So, don't worry about me. I will battle on, and I'm sure I will survive with all that unwanted attention. Listen, I hardly go out these days, so it's not like it's the biggest problem in my life. I've got to the point in my life where routine is comfortable, and having my house just as I like it and having my personal belongings to hand feels good. I don't need wild or dangerous experiences in my life, and I certainly don't need to concoct a social life just for myself. I've done all the crazy things in my life, and I've been in plenty of dangerous situations, but everything must come to an end. Every November, when I complete another year, is a reminder of my advancing years and how I need to recognise different pleasures in life and start thinking about more cultural experiences and less about physical ones. It doesn't mean that I don't want to suddenly spend all day in a big chair smoking a pipe and watching TV. But it does mean that my days of falling out of discos at 4 a.m. drunk as a skunk are over. And I now know that hangovers can be avoided by drinking less recklessly. Yes, I am finally growing up. If you believe that, then yes, you are as daft as me. There you go. It was not as short as I thought. 11 minutes, so quite a bit in there. Few expressions, few words. See what you can understand. Okay, until the next time. Goodbye.